Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the regular city council meeting for May the 7th. I'd like to ask everybody in the audience that can to stand as we start every meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the
flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Are there any agenda additions, deletions, or amendments? We have anybody signed up for citizen participation? Okay, as I call your name, if you would come to the counter and identify yourself for the folks at home. And if you keep your comments to 3 or 4 minutes, I'd appreciate it. Scott, welcome, sir. You're on.
Good evening, council members. I won't take long. I just have one general quick question with regard to everything. I saw something recently that said that they were looking for an increase with regard to everything that would have something to do with increasing your taxes by 11% or whatever the percentage is. Don't quote me, but essentially it would equate to an increase of 3 cents on the every 1,000 or whatever it is that it comes down to. If I've got my facts correct, I'm trying to do all this off recollection with regard to everything. But the thing that really jumped out at me is just in the last 10 to 15 minutes, I've been speaking with some, very pleasant people out here, and it raises one question for me with regard to everything. There was a question out there back in the day when we were going to decide who was going to be the council member for District 2. And when everybody met up at that forum to have an open debate about that, one person in the audience asked the question, how come things like the ice rink don't get put on the referendum when we go to decide who's going to be our mayor, who's going to be our council member, our governor, our senate, et cetera, et cetera. And then somebody else said something about a swimming pool accordingly. How come items like that don't get put on the referendum as opposed to being decided by you all as to which it's going to be, instead of letting the people speak as to which one they want? Because the one that I'm hearing is with the ice rink, more people outside Bowie want it than more people inside Bowie want it. And if somebody can answer that question before the night's out, I'd really appreciate it. That's pretty much
I'll be glad to chat with you later.
I had to share.
Okay, thank you. Now, the proposal in this year's budget is for a proposed 3-cent tax increase. I don't know where we're going to end up with, but that was the starting point in this year's budget.
Right.
That's where we are. Now, we've also already accrued a 1-cent tax reduction in our county taxes. Our county, your property taxes that you pay the county will be reduced this year by 1% because of the tax differential for the services that we provide to the city. So far, we'll have a 3-cent, but right now it looks like it may be 2 or less. But we'll as we go through the budget, obviously, that'll become final.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Thanks for your time, folks.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have signed up for that. Mr. City Manager?
Mr. Mayor, I have no report today. Thank you.
Okay. All right, council, you have a consent agenda, items A through E. Do I have a motion on the consent agenda? Mr. Gardner, second by Mr. Marcos. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Unanimous. Thank you. Old business, FY 2019 budget, CIP, and constant yield tax. Mr. City Manager?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. The City of Bowie proposes to increase real property taxes. That notice was put forth for the appropriate length of time, and I'll go through it by the numbers so nothing gets left out. For the tax year beginning July 1, 2018, the estimated real property assessable base will increase by 4.1% from $6,826,805,132 to $7,100,000,000 $103,925,013. If the city of Bowie maintains the current tax rate of .40 per 100 of assessment, real property tax revenues will increase by 4.1%, resulting in a $1,108,479 increase of new real property tax revenue. In order to fully offset the effect of increasing assessments, the real property tax rate should be reduced to .3844, the constant yield tax rate. Number 4, the city of Bowie is considering not reducing the real property tax rate enough to fully offset the increasing assessments. The city of Bowie proposes to adopt a real property tax rate of .43 per $100 of assessment. This tax rate is 11.9% higher than the constant yield tax rate and will generate $3,239,390 in addition to the property tax revenues. A public hearing on the proposed real property tax rate should be conducted immediately following.
Okay, do we have anybody signed to speak? Again, as I invite you up, if you take a place with the microphone. Okay. Gary Allen, and he'll be followed by Dustin Kazan. Mr. Allen, welcome, our former mayor. Good to see you, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and Council. Good evening to see all of you. It was my pleasure in February to appear before you to talk about the next 7 steps at that point toward a green Bowie in February. And I don't intend to repeat in detail the recommendations I made that evening. But since you're now looking at the budget, I think it's appropriate that we return and I try to highlight a couple of the details of those proposals that have specific budget impacts over the next several minutes. In September, looking ahead, the EAC will again appear before you, but that time to recommend a complete streets policy, which was consistent with the #1 recommendation we made last February. And at that point, we'll outline in detail what that policy articulates. It's important to recognize that to date, 5 of Maryland's local governments have complete streets policies, including 3 of the 4 cities that are ranked larger than us here in Maryland. That includes Baltimore City, obviously, Rockville, and Frederick. By the way, the other 2 are Annapolis and Salisbury. So one of the missing ones in the top 5 is the city of Bowie. A complete streets policy includes a vision to interlink all of our transportation choices and alternatives where appropriate by specifying that all users, pedestrians, bicyclists, transit passengers of all ages and abilities, have access to the transportation network as fully as possible, and that there's a conscious effort on behalf of the community's transportation planners to interlink these options to accommodate the different lifestyle choices that our citizens are likely to make in the years ahead. The good first step in the budget before you this evening to move toward that policy is the Trails Master Plan found on your budget, if you want to make a quick note, on page 135. It's not a part of the recommended budget as I understand it from the city manager, but it is very much a part of the recommendations that the council and the green team and the committee that briefed you on complete streets and interconnectivity, and they appeared before you just about a month ago. It's important to recognize in this specific recommendation that from our standpoint, the staff cannot update this plan on its own, and that consultant resources, we believe, are required in the coming fiscal year to do this update. Estimates vary about what that plan might cost, and you'll find a continuum of costs in the budget estimates. But it's important to recognize that this Trails Master Plan hasn't been updated by the city in 16 years. And therefore, I don't think it's appropriate to call on the staff alone to do this again. The last update, a brief update in some of the areas, was done about 10 years ago. It's important to recognize that this Trails Master Plan is an essential ingredient in a Complete Streets program, and frankly, it's a good first step toward the master plan process, which is approximately 2 years away now. So if we begin to plan now with these small investments, we'll be in a much better position to highlight our needs in a larger transportation planning network in the years ahead, 2 years from now, with the overall master plan process. And it's important to recognize that this idea is consistent with the sustainability plan you adopted just a couple years ago, because more and more of our residents have highlighted wellness and walking and bicycling as a part of their health needs in the future of this community. So all these things I think you find are consistent with the need to do this kind of master plan trail update. In addition, it's also important to look at funding on page 263, another one of those notes, for the construction of the Bowie Heritage Trail CIP projects. So this isn't a consultant project here. This is an actual construction project, a small one, which helps move us along toward improving in a specific way the trail network here in Bowie. On the more modest side, I'd like to highlight a couple of the things that we've talked about on several occasions in the past. Of course, I would be remiss if I didn't remind you that a couple of members of my EAC are here. My vice chair, John Teasdale, Netherland, Norman Markoff are here this evening, and our funding needs are really modest, only $800 in the proposal, because we want to do a workshop with some of our local nonprofits on how they can do local fundraising more effectively across the state. But the green team needs a little bit more than that, about $9,000, because they're the project-oriented as opposed to the policy-oriented part of the process. But there are 6 other small things that I want to remind you were a part of all of our earlier recommendations over the past several years. One of them that we've consistently called attention to is the opportunity to remove expanded polystyrene plastic, styrofoam, from the waste stream. And this can be initiated very modestly for hardly more than $6,000 by setting up collection stations at several points in the community. We recommend we start with 3, one north, central, and south. They run about $1,500 a piece. Costs about $500 to put them together with all the various logos and all that kind of stuff. It's a great start. And working with the Sustainable Maryland program, we think we can lead other communities here in Prince George's into starting this effort on a broader basis with maybe a half a dozen other Prince George's County communities. It's a good modest first step. The second one I'll mention in this area is, again, a modest first step, and that is the installation of a natural exploration area in a local park for our children. This is a way to introduce kids to nature. So many kids spend a lot of time looking at screens these days. We need a specific option for parents to take their kids out, which is comfortable and safe, and take them to introduce to nature. That's what this natural exploration idea is all about. There's plenty of detail which we've provided in the past on this thing. We'd like you to see if you can include the completion of the cost-benefit study for the transition of the city to LED lighting in the future. We've been talking about it now for several years. It's time that we had a good, clear cost-benefit study that allows you to make a decision on this in the years ahead. Without that data really tied down, I'm sure that this decision will be one of those things that's easy to put off. So that data is what we want to encourage you to get it. Modest study, probably costing less than $25,000, would help nail this. Remember, more than a dozen communities in the metropolitan area and more than 1,000 nationwide have already made this choice and are moving toward it. By the way, we've found that one of our top priorities in the sustainability plan was the establishment of a community garden site. Well, that won't be possible if water isn't available. So I hope that you'll take a look at how to encourage staff and be open to the idea of their advocacy for the access to water for any specific site that is identified. I know staff has been talking about this. A specific opportunity may exist, and it'll cost a few dollars in cooperation with the county to bring water to that site. Again, I'll not go into the detail, but we estimate that that would be accomplished for less than $25,000 to create this kind of thing. By the way, what we've noticed as we've walked, and I'm sure you have walked around the community, is that there's a lot of folks who still don't clearly understand what single stream recycling is all about. And so a lot of our residents continue to make a lot of mistakes about what is or is not recyclable. So we intend to encourage strongly the Public Works Department to mount again a stronger effort to inform our citizens about this effort, and at the same time to begin to expand the option for making the opportunity not merely for single stream recycling, but also to help bring about this whole idea of garbage waste in the thing and expand that program. And we're looking in the future to expand it to all of our single family dwellings. We've been working on a pilot now. This is the second fiscal year. It's time to look at the costs of expanding that throughout the whole community for residential food waste. Those we think are modest things that we can do, things that we need data on, things that you'll begin to look at and say, well, how much would that cost? What would it do? What would be its impact? And rather than talk merely about pipe dreams and that kind of things, we want you to have the data on which fundamental sound decisions can be made. This is the time to step forward and make sure the money is available to make that data available to you for that kind of decision in the year ahead. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
Appreciate your time.
Dustin? And Dustin followed by Patty McConaughey. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is, for the record, my name is Dustin Kuzan. I'm on Silver Maple Court in Bowie Forest. I am here on behalf of the subgroup of the Green Team known as the Multimodal Transportation and Public Spaces, or aka MAPS group. We have about 40 registered members right now, of which we had 30 a month ago at the Green Expo. We actually got about 10 extra members. So every time we're out and about, we get a lot of interest in this topic. And I'm here to say that we do support funding for a Trails Master Plan update for three reasons, really. There is a demand, which I'll demonstrate a little bit of. There's a financial benefit behind having a plan in place that we can, get in order now, and for years to come, we can take advantage of this plan and save the city money over time. And we, if we're really committed to this topic, and there's a lot of people with interest in this, and we talk about it a lot amongst each other, that we are committed to it, that this is the first step in that commitment. So when we were at the Green Expo, our group took a little survey. It was a small survey of 23 people, and asked them certain questions about their interest in walking and biking, and if they think that the city values putting money towards these projects. And one specific question we asked was, did they support money going towards a Trails Plan update? And 21 of the 23 said they do support putting money towards a Trails update. In addition to that, 21 of 23 said they support putting money towards building infrastructure for more walking. 19 of 23 said they support putting more funding towards building infrastructure for bicycling. And 18 of the 23 said they support putting money towards infrastructure for traffic calming in the city. To reference another plan, Bowie Sustainability Plan, which was done in 2016, there was another survey done in April of 2016 where 180 community members were surveyed, and 21% of those the respondents said that they do support funding towards expanding the existing trail system in the city. 26% said they would like to increase awareness of existing trails, and 41% said they would like to increase public gathering spaces, which all of this could be wrapped into the Trails Master Plan. And actually that 41% was actually the number one need or demand of all those respondents. They said that they all want, that was the top ranking demand of that survey. As kind of a result of this, there was 2 strategies created under the sustainability plan, which the city has adopted. One of these strategies was to increase awareness of trails, and another was to increase the expansion, or to expand the existing trail system. To date, I think we've done some a little bit here and there, but I think putting a master plan in place that figures out what we're gonna do in the next several years is actually a huge step towards reaching that goal of expanding the existing trail system. There's another goal, getting into the finances and how this benefits us financially. There's another goal under that sustainability plan to partner with the county and state to determine resources to leverage for trails funding. And I'm not sure if we've done a whole lot of work in that area to date, but if we do get a list together in this, under the Trails Master Plan, then we can start reaching out to state and local county partners to identify funding sources such as Gary mentioned, there's a new complete streets policy coming out. They'll have funding tied to it, safe routes to school funding, transportation alternatives plan funding, and then the list goes on of potential funding opportunities that we can tie ourselves to. And getting furthermore into the finances, and if we talk about taxes and how the plan can help increase our tax rate, our tax base, there's a study done by walkscore.com, which was referenced in the sustainability plan, that talks about how home values increase by anywhere between $700 to $3,000 per walk score increase. Right now, the city of Bowie has a 25 points to the walk score. Our neighboring towns, Laurel, College Park, Landover, and Greenbelt, all beat us by at least 17 points, where Laurel beats us by 35 points. So if we were to match simply Greenbelt alone, and theoretically we could increase home values by $12,000 to $51,000 per home. And all this starts with a plan, the trails, and right now we're discussing the trails plan. Now we can go any form of what this trails plan can be, but really we just need a commitment to start putting money towards a master plan. And that's why I'm here to ask if we can at least take that first step.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Patty McConaughey, and be followed by Ken. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Patty McCoy, a resident of Bowie since 1992. I'm an avid walker and cyclist on Bowie's streets, sidewalks, and trails, preferring these slower modes of transportation whenever and wherever possible. Throughout these 26 years, the city of Bowie has experienced significant expansion of population and traffic, making streets and intersections with sidewalks and trails less safe. Traffic moves faster than can be policed on many of our streets, and too many motorists often fail to notice or acknowledge pedestrians and cyclists. The current Trails Master Plan is more than a decade out of date with respect to current and planned developments. Without funding for an updated plan, the city risks losing opportunities that provide for adequate maintenance and expansion of safe pedestrian and cycling corridors in the early stages of development. It is many times more costly to provide safe corridors after the fact, and too often they are left out, leaving residents with no safe options outside of their vehicles. Without a solid and forward-thinking plan, the city cannot effectively communicate to developers the safe connectivity needs of Bowie residents, thereby missing critical opportunities to support modern, active lifestyles. Additionally, on April 24th, 2018, Governor Hogan approved Maryland House Bill 285, Department of Transportation, Pedestrian and Bicycle Access to Schools. The summary of this bill states, I quote, requiring the Department of Transportation to collect and consolidate available information from state and local agencies regarding an unmet need for safe pedestrian and bicycle access to schools in the state, and requiring the department to report its findings to the governor and the General Assembly on or before January 1st of 2020. Restoring the 2019 funding for the Trails Master Plan update will allow the city to present a thoughtful and complete survey of Bowie's current and planned improvements in support of this bill. In summary, I would like to present this visual to help the council members to remember this important message. Please fund the Trails Master Plan update in 2019.
Thank you. Very clever. Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Ken Money. Welcome, sir.
Good evening. I'm Ken McCoy. I've been a Bowie resident since 1993. I'm also a person who walks and bicycles in the city for both recreation and for transportation. In fact, I'm able to do about 90% of my errands locally here on the weekends, car-free. And I do this because I enjoy it. It's possible to do in the city. And depending on my destination, it's because of the infrastructure. Sometimes it's in spite of the infrastructure. Walking and bicycling are more than recreation. It is also transportation. And it's no secret that in the city, traffic is a leading concern within the community. All the focus has been primarily on motor vehicles. And clearly, if you build for cars, you get cars. So what about the other modes? Let me point out that the American Discovery Trail is something that passes through the city of Bowie. About a year ago, we hosted a young fellow who was hiking from San Francisco to Lewis, Delaware, through Bowie. People use that trail. Likewise, the East Coast Greenway passes through Bowie, not more than a mile from here. And that's a non-motorized transportation corridor that goes all the way from Maine to Florida. Neither of these trails are on the Bowie Master Plan map. So Bowie has a trails master plan that already includes some transportation links in addition to recreation. The plan was adopted back in 2002. The map itself was last revised in 2010. It's time for an update. The city has seen lots of changes. Even way back then, the plan even states 47% would either consider walking or biking to work, or would actually walk or bike to work if it were safe and convenient to do so. At the time, 20% did. And they would bike for or walk for shopping and recreation trips. That demand is still there, it's unmet. Furthermore, the plan states, in early 1995, the City Council appointed an 8-member transportation planning task force whose purpose was to provide a comprehensive vision for the direction of transportation within the city. It should take in a time frame up to the year 2015. It's 2018. It's overdue for a new plan, and the plan says so itself. So I strongly support the planning staff recommendation to fund a new revised Trails Master Plan. This would help meet the city goals, as we talked about from the speakers, about sustainability plan, which you approved, which not only does promote biking and walking, which is good for your health, reduces emissions, reduces traffic, but also has another benefit. If I bike local, I buy local. It's good for the community. It keeps the money in the community. A couple years ago, my wife and I had the opportunity to bike across the country. We biked from Cape May, New Jersey to Seaside, Oregon. We traveled through 13 states and hundreds of communities. Did this over 108 days. So we saw the good, the bad, and the ugly of biking and walking accommodations. Directly experienced this stuff as users. So Bowie is not too bad, but it's not as good as it could be. And that's what I'd like to see change. I'd like to see Bowie do better. So I support the funding for the master plan, and I concur with what the speakers have previously said before me.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate your comments. Janet Nossenberger. Welcome, ma'am. And she'll be followed by John Teasdale. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Councilman, women. I'm Janice Knelsenberger. I live on Memphis Lane in Bowie. We moved here in '89. We actually were searching in Virginia for 2 months. And we were drawn here when we saw the sense of community with the Bowie Day at the Allen Pond. We liked the trails, we liked the bike paths. Since then, the bike path behind our house has become a highway. Okay, progress, it was planned. But if I try to take my bike up to Hilltop, coming down on the path is not safe because I always get cut off by cars turning into Giant. If I want to take the road, that's not safe. I find I will take my bike on my car and go outside of Bowie to bike. I'd rather not. We have one little trail that I feel safe that I can just go and not worry about traffic. We walk a lot. These are all things. I know the city is a green city. This is extremely attractive. So we've been thinking age in place, what's pros, what's cons. And what Gary Allen spoke about, I totally support, and the funding for a new update for the master plan for the trails, I totally support. And that's all I have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. John, Mr. Teasdale, welcome, sir. Let's see.
John Teasdale, I'm also a Bowie resident, District 2 resident. And as Gary mentioned, I'm also the vice chair of the EAC. So I'm also here to support the updating the city trails master plan. The objective in the current budget is currently not funded, and I encourage council to fund the development of this plan. The estimate seems to be about $50,000 to $100,000 to do a first-rate job that would include hiring a consultant and obtaining citizen input. There's three reasons that I'm going to list. Gary has already, several of the speakers have already alluded to the first, is that it is aligned with strategic planning goals that the city already has, the sustainability plan, et cetera. The second, Gary mentioned, Park and Planning will be developing a new master plan, and doing this now would dovetail well with that master plan. The third item relates to what Ken just talked about, the fact that we need a trail system that can better integrate with these national and regional trail systems that do cross through the Bowie area. Such connections could attract long-distance trail users to Bowie businesses and make Bowie a desirable en-route destination. One example, the Rails to Trails Conservancy estimated that the Great Allegheny Passage Trail, this is a trail that goes from Cumberland to Pittsburgh, and this trail has attracts 700,000 users yearly. It infuses $40 million into 8 towns along the way of this path. It's created 54 new or expanded businesses and created 83 new jobs that pay over $7.5 million in wages each year. So there is a potential economic benefit to the city, I think, if this is done right. I also recognize that this would increase city expenditures and that many are calling for reduced expenditures and maintaining our tax rate at the same level. So I'd just like to say that I, for one, am willing to accept a higher tax rate if it means that Bowie can invest in meaningfully expanded services that would improve the quality of life for Bowie residents and make Bowie a more vibrant destination for visitors.
Well,
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. And our final speakers will, is it Sulamy? I come close? Welcome, sir.
That's quite all right, Council. I did not have any prepared remarks. I just wanted to register my support in funding the Trails Master Plan. All of my compatriots in the MAPS team have already expressed, I think, very adequately our desires. I'll just add a brief comment that I travel a little bit for work. I get to move around the country a little bit and see what other communities are doing or have done with regard to supporting infrastructure for basically transporting themselves without getting in a vehicle by themselves and moving through town. And it seems that Bowie is while it has some wonderful infrastructure, is starting to fall behind, and now is a wonderful opportunity for it to update its master plan and catch back up with the rest of the country. There are, I'll say that I happen to work for Exelon. They made a merger commitment to do a pilot program to expand trails along their transmission corridors in Montgomery and Prince George's County. The pilot for that project, I believe, breaks ground sometime this month, unless it's been delayed. The pilot, unfortunately for us, is in Montgomery County. However, I think that would offer Bowie a tremendous opportunity if we get our master plan updated and revised, as others have suggested, as the county moves forward with plans to expand those trails along the corridors in Prince George's County. It would very nicely dovetail into our existing infrastructure and give us the opportunity to expand it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, I appreciate it. That's all the people I will speak. What we will be
Mayor?
doing is,
We have one more speaker. This is Byron Matthews, the Finance Director for the City of Bowie. Normally during this time, the Financial Advisory Committee will give their presentation. The Financial Advisory Committee was formed in 1998 to review and advise the council on the city's financial conditions and to enhance the distribution of financial information to the community. One of the areas in which they provide their opinion is on the proposed budget. Today we have Rodney Yancey from the Financial Advisory Committee to give you their insight to the proposed budget, sir.
fine. Welcome. Good to see you again.
Thank you very much.
You weren't on my list, but so welcome.
Well, thank you for the time to address the city council members and Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you very much. The Bowie Financial Advisory Committee has reviewed the proposed budget for the fiscal year 2019. We're glad to see a budget that still maintains a high level of service to the community and continues to make the city of Bowie such a desirable place to live. As in the past, the committee also commends the council and city staff, the city manager as well as the financial manager, for having held off increases in the tax rate for so long. I know that we just recently had one is proposed now. Engaging citizens as part of their consideration of increased capital investments, expanding services, and continuing to maintain the overall infrastructure of the city. Over the last several years, the city has operated at a high level of financial prudence and has financially outperformed many other cities in the area and as well as the country. Each year, the FAC attempts to highlight trends and details in the budget that we believe may warrant a closer level of investigation and/or may require a future strategy to mitigate potential liabilities to the budget or the services provided to our citizens. This year's review draws attention to four main areas that we hope will spark further attention from the city's leadership: community services, capital improvements, the strategic plan or general fund and revenues, and finally public safety and the police department. One of the things that I'd like to do also is to thank the Chief of Police, Chief Neske, for having come out and spoken to the Financial Advisory Committee along with his team, the Deputy Chief and a member of the Public Safety Committee. They came out and discussed their financial challenges that they're having, as well as some of their plans, and they mentioned the strategic plan that they're developing as well for the next few years. But finally, I just want to highlight a couple things. One is to briefly discuss the community services and the general fund and revenues. For community services, the annual budget provides funding for community services, making Bowie a wonderful city to live in. Surveys taken by the FAC during Bowie Fest 2017 showed that 42% of our respondents cite parks and recreation as a positive aspect of the Bowie community. Given community appreciation for these facilities, we consider these well worth the tax revenue spent. Finally, the general fund and revenues. The growth of the operating expenditures has exceeded the growth of operating revenues. This isn't acceptable as an ongoing state and obviously will not result in long-term financial stability. We believe the fiscal prudence is needed given future projections. The current budget projects a revenue increase of 7.2% and an expenditure increase of 8.6%. Given these estimates, we encourage the City Council to institute a capital improvement plan strategic approach, which ties closely to a measurable demand signal by the population. Lacking such a demand, we would hope that such efforts would not be encouraged. We are concerned with a model where a limited group of citizens mandate financially imprudent actions, coupling all the community with long-term out-of-pocket implications in a fiscally upside-down environment. Should right-sizing occur, then such expenditures may be appropriate. We would appreciate an opportunity to engage with council on how we can determine whether the citizen demand warrants going against the appropriate posture of restraint should exist at this time. We do commend the city manager for using the fund balance and only slowly raising the tax rate to meet rising costs. However, maintenance and upkeep may need to be considered over large capital improvement projects. So I just want to at this point just thank the City Council once again for your time. I appreciate the opportunity each year and actually a couple of other times to be able to address you as well.
Well, thank the committee.
Thank you.
You know, we've said it before, there's so many outstanding financial wizards on that committee. I just wish we could afford to pay them.
There are quite a few, and
Yeah,
a few of them are in the FAC, and it'd be nice if we could get some more on there as well. But but I see that there's been quite a bit of citizen engagement this evening as well. So, thank you again.
Thank you, and thank you for your input, wise input. Okay, just a quick refresher. I thank everybody for their comments tonight, and they're well taken and well presented. I've made a number of notes about the discussion tonight. Our next meeting, our wrap-up session is next Monday night?
Yes, 14th.
Okay. Currently, there's not an item in the budget for that proposal. So I will bring it up at the wrap-up and see what council wants to do on it. There's a couple of changes that'll be made, and you know, some of the numbers are still a little bit fluid. So feel free to come back next Monday, but I thank everybody for their input tonight.
Mr. Mayor, would there be any opposition tonight to, asking staff to look at putting a couple of the recommended items back into the budget? So I know, like, for instance, they mentioned the LED lights and the recycling routes, which I know we talked to George about, and he's already looking into that. But for the master plan trails update in particular, would anyone object to us putting that back in and having them get started on that?
We can get their response to that
Okay.
between now and next Monday night.
All right, that's fair.
Are you asking just for the trails, or asking for the trails and LED lights? Because we did
So the
address
LED lights,
Wait a minute, one at a time.
So for the LED lights, I know that we talked to George about that on the Public Works evening, and basically, he had in the
Yeah,
back of
I
his
think
mind
there's
told
something
us-
ongoing on that.
He had an ongoing study at that point. I know he gave us his opinion at the time, but the study for the trail master plans is something that I would like us to put back in and
Okay, so
get that underway.
you're just asking for the trails, not the LED lights?
Correct. The
Okay,
LED
because the LED lights were addressed in the council package. Because I asked about Kensington, and he followed up on Kensington.
Gotcha.
I don't know if you missed it.
No,
Okay.
we're on the same page.
Okay. All right, so we'll be prepared to discuss that next Monday night.
All right, sir, so what particularly so on the 14th, you'll also address the issue of the proposed tax increase also? Or will you all address that tonight?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
The proposed tax increase, and
Well, we haven't
Council
done
yield
that
the
yet.
question. Are you all going to
We're
address
gonna
that
do it right
tonight
now.
or on the 14th?
I'm sorry?
Do it tonight or the 14th. Item last on the agenda. Item B on the agenda. Do you want to do that tonight or next week? This one.
We can do that tonight after this if you want. You want to do that tonight, or you want to do it next week?
Well, in order to set the tax rates or.
Oh, okay.
There
We can
were,
refer that, we can roll that over to next week.
okay, well, we just need to state it. So that'll be addressed on the 14th.
Okay.
Right.
All right, well, then the last item before you tonight is you have a recommendation from staff on. Excuse me, point of order. What? Wait a minute. I'm sorry. Let me see my notes here.
No, it doesn't.
Do you guys want to roll that over until next week?
I thought the discussion was merely to include, to take into consideration the comments that we heard this evening from the numerous speakers about these items that range from the styrofoam recycling, the exploration, the natural exploration area, cost benefit to transportation of LED lighting, community gardens, single stream, and trails master plan. I think we were talking about those and whether or not they get into the budget or not. And my understanding was that we had a couple of them that were called out specifically for consideration that would be rolled into the discussion next time we meet in a budget work session. Is that what we understand?
That's next Monday.
Yeah, and I'd like to just, for simplicity, just say, let's take a look at these, all of these items that we've talked about, whether they all get included or not. Let's have a discussion about each of those items in the next budget work session.
That's where my notes are here for
Okay.
next wrap-up. Yeah, I made the notes
Which
about
is-
the trail system and the other things we talked about tonight.
Exactly, which is separate and distinct from the issue of the taxes, which I think we have to address this evening.
We'll do that tonight.
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
Clear that up a little bit.
So we're all on the same page?
The,
Okay,
Mayor, Mr. Mayor,
all right, now the last item,
the constant yield statute says that you have to have your public hearing 21 days after your notice and on the advertised date, which is tonight. However, you can either address at that meeting, that is the 21-day notice meeting, you can either address the constant yield tax rate, and you should do that specifically, not necessarily with regard to the tax rate you are setting, but to confirm specifically that you are setting a tax rate that differs from the constant yield rate. But you can also do that at another meeting as long as you announce the date at the meeting that is the 21-day notice hearing.
Sorry, so we are talking about taxes tonight, right? We're not moving that away.
I'm sorry, no, we're not talking about the proposed tax. The only thing on the agenda tonight was
The constant yield tax rate.
yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Point of parliamentary
And
inquiry.
we are going to
Wait a
discuss that tonight. We haven't
sorry?
moved that back. We haven't moved the discussion about the constant yield tax rate back, right?
That's on the agenda for tonight.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure we're all clear
Yeah.
on that. So we are discussing that tonight. Right.
No,
Mr.
now you
Mayor.
got me confused.
If you all want to discuss and decide on the tax rate, that's your option. And it's on the agenda for the night. We can either set the tax rate tonight or not. But if we're gonna set it on the 21st or the 14th, we have to stipulate that because of the timing.
Yeah. My sense would be that we would do the constant
It's up to
yield
you though.
tonight.
It's up to you all
And
when
do that tonight,
and
and
how
then
you do it.
we'll discuss these other things will be separate and apart from.
Point of
Okay.
parliamentary inquiry.
Go
I have a parliamentary inquiry, and I'll address this to whoever, city manager or the attorney, city attorney. But since we posted the agenda, we have an obligation to fulfill the agenda unless something comes up in the agenda where we cannot take care of that agenda at this particular meeting. In such case, my understanding is that a table would be in order, and the table has to be very specific. It has to tell why you're doing the table, and it has to be specific for a date. That's my understanding. Am I correct?
You're not tabling anything because there hasn't been a motion made? And you can...
Exactly. In order for us to do it, we'd have to, we don't want to, in order for us to postpone it, I'm saying it would have to be done through a table since you've already advertised it and since you,
It doesn't have to be a motion to table, it just, the statute says you have to announce the date on which you are going to consider the constant yield. So it would be advisable to do that by motion. However, the statute specifically says announcement needs to be made, and the city manager's statement with regard, confirmation of your direction with regard to the date on which that hearing will occur is sufficient. That said, it would be advisable for you to make a motion regarding the date on which you intend to address the constant yield.
I have a motion to make.
Excuse me. The public hearing is closed right now.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I'd like point of order here.
well, we don't do that here. We've had a hearing, we're resolving the item on the agenda right now.
And this was on the agenda tonight. That's what one of your councilmen.
That's right, and we've had the public hearing on that, and we're now discussing how we're gonna resolve it. Thank you. Did you get your question answered? Okay. All right, now, the item before you tonight is you have staff recommendation to keep the constant yield rate at 40 cents.
Mr. Mayor.
No, it would go to 43 cents if you adopt the 3-cent tax increase.
Mr.
We
Mayor.
haven't done that.
That's what I think this is asking for, us to do. If you look at the resolution, there's a resolution that should be attached to it. And the resolution will spell out what it is.
My understanding is that at 40 cents, you will still exceed the constant yield rate. You should confirm that with your Director of Finance, but that is my understanding.
That's correct, you will. You'll exceed it by $1,108,479, just if we keep the constant yield, the rate at 40 cents per 100. So there are two components here. There's that, and also there's the proposed tax increase. So this is more complex than we normally do because there is a tax increase proposal, which also had to be advertised in the same fashion that we did this.
Yeah. So in order to do this, we would have to adopt the constant yield and the new tax rate? Or roll this over too?
If you adopt the new tax rate, it will also exceed the constant yield. In order to keep the tax yield constant, you would have to reduce the tax rate.
What was this question?
I'm confused here myself.
So if I, just for, if I may, just to make sure I have an understanding. Mr. Finance Director, currently our constant yield tax, to maintain a constant yield for our taxes, we would have to reduce the tax rate to 38 and change?
That's correct, sir.
All right. And
38.3844.
all right. And we need to address that issue, whether we're going to maintain the constant yield tax rate or not. Option one is to leave it as it is,
And that's a staff's proposal.
and that's
That is our
Staff-
proposal.
staff proposal is to leave it at
So
38?
leave it at 40.
Leave it at 40.
And to accept the increase in the assessment, that $1,108,479.
Thanks.
Excuse me, the staff recommendation is to increase the taxes to 43 cents. And that's what we have to vote on tonight.
Right.
Or give another date in which you're going to address that issue.
Right.
But the notification was that was going to be addressed.
Please,
Yes. So the 38 and change is the constant yield tax rate. That's the constant yield tax rate. The current tax rate is 40 cents.
Correct.
The proposed rate, as recommended by city staff, is 43 cents per 100.
That's correct, sir.
All right. And it's our choice this evening which one we'd like to go, 38 and change, 40 as the way it stands right now, or 43 as recommended by staff,
Mr. Mayor,
or anything else that we decide amongst ourselves.
well,
Mr. Mayor,
this is where I'm confused. It was this is where I'm confused. I thought the initial event tonight was to consider the constant yield, either drop the tax rate from 40 to 38, or leave it as it is, and then when we adopt, or complete the wrap-up session to determine what the final tax rate would be.
well, Mr. Mayor, it's my recommendation that we do this. Since there's a possibility that, there may be some budget maneuvers that would adjust, that could possibly change and/or affect the final tax rate. I recommend that we postpone the final vote on the tax rate since it's apparent that they are enjoined here to the 21st, when all of our maneuvers and adjustments are complete. And that we do it on that night, and on that night, we select the enjoined components, the constant yield and the proposal, and address those all at once. That's my recommendation.
Sorry, can I ask a question, Mr. Mayor? So I have no problem pushing back the vote if we want to do that, and if there's additional things, that may potentially change staff's recommendation, I think that's fine. Would it be okay, though, if the residents who came here tonight, who specifically, it sounds like, wanted to speak on the issue, would be okay if we let them speak tonight so that they don't have to come back a second time? Is that okay? Are we okay just?
What is it? You want to go through this again?
So everyone who has signed up, did we have anyone signed up to speak specifically on the tax rate tonight?
No, everybody that signed up to speak spoke on the issue that they want. Most all the speakers tonight were on the trail issue.
Oh, okay. So there was no one
And
else
that-
who wanted to speak on the tax issue?
The normal
Okay.
process is that would roll over to our wrap-up session.
Right.
And when there are any final adjustments, because there are other things we still haven't resolved the rate schedule at the facilities. There's 2 or 3 other things that are still pending. Our normal process is to vote on the constant yield as a separate item. And then when we go to wrap-up, we adjust all those things that came up in the wrap-up, what council finally agrees on, and then we would apply the recommendation for a 3-cent tax increase, or vote on 3 cent or 2 cent, or whatever you wanted to do.
Right.
At that point. But the constant yield would be done.
Okay. Yeah, I have no problem delaying the vote. I just want to make sure everyone was heard.
Yeah.
So if we delay it, people will have more opportunities to talk. We'll just give the public more
My
opportunities to
recommendation
share
would be to
input.
vote
Okay.
on the constant yield thing.
Yes.
Get that done, and then when we reconvene for the wrap-up, we can, staff has indicated that some other issues that they want to bring forward in terms of maybe that will affect their recommendation for the 3-cent tax
Gotcha.
increase.
Okay.
So that way, if we do it separately, we can at least have the knowledge of that, plus the debate on the wrap-up.
Yeah, I have no
For
problem
this
doing them
as well.
separately. If we want to vote on the constant yield tonight and
Yeah,
then look at it.
That's what I would prefer we do.
Yeah, that works for me.
That works
Yeah.
for me, too.
Mr. Mayor, with that, could I make a motion so we can try to avoid all the confusion? And the motion being to accept staff's recommendation to leave the constant yield tax rate as it's been at 0.40.
All right, is there a second?
So I second the motion to,
Wait a minute.
Mr. Mayor, that's not the staff recommendation.
The staff recommendation is 38.
No, it didn't.
No,
43.
43.
Staff recommendation is 43.
I'm sorry. The motion to follow the current rate that we have in place, which is 0.40.
I second the motion for the tax rate at 0.4%.
I am good with that, too.
So the motion is to exceed the constant yield rate.
leave the constant yield rate.
No, to exceed the constant yield
Yes,
rate.
yes.
Yes.
That's
I
what.
just, I want to be clear that should be incorporated in the motion.
Yeah, all right, so staff has suggested that, given the rise in the rates, or the value of the bond, in order to keep the rate down, we would have had to either reduce it or keep it flat. And the motion now, was there a second?
Yes.
You second, all right, so there's a motion and a second to leave the constant yield rate at 40 and not reduce it to 38. Okay, all right, does everybody understand the motion? All in favor? Wait, you got a question on the motion?
Okay, because the audience, they look a little confused. I'm looking at people. I know, I totally got it. We're staying at 40, we're keeping everything as it is,
As it is
now.
today.
Tax rate stays the same. We're not raising taxes. We're keeping the constant yield rate as it exists currently.
Well, when you do, wait a minute,
No.
wait a minute. When you do this, there's a de facto tax increase in that, because in order to keep it flat under the state proposal, we would have had to go to 38.3. if we decline to do that and keep it at 40, so there is a 1% tax
Okay,
increase.
okay,
Okay.
okay, got it, okay.
All right, any other questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? All right, 6-1, yes. Okay. 6 to keep the tax rate at 40. Now, is consensus, you want to roll over the new business item until next week? Okay. Is that a consensus?
Any,
All right, new business item A goes to next week, Mr. Gordon.
thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move to adjourn.
Moved and second, any question on the motion? All in,
Wait,
what?
there's one more item on the agenda, on the new business, which has
Another
to
item.
do with the consolidated plan. What is?
Mr. Bugs.
Go ahead, Mr.
Staff is here, is prepared to do this, right? All right, let's get it done. All right, because it is, we did advertise it as a public hearing. All right, new business, consolidated plan FY 19-23.
Good evening. Next month marks the end of the city's current approved 5-year funding cycle under the Community Development Block Grant Program with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Over the past 5 years, what we've done is do senior family housing rehab, actually over the past 10 years. And during that period of time, we have improved the homes of seniors who own their homes. I think we did about 200 homes. About 60 of those homes were in District 1, Council District 1. 61 were in Council District 2, 14 were in 3, and 28 were in 4. And the investments range between about $650,000 in Council District 1 to about $150,000 in Council District 3 or 4. During the past 9 months, the Grants Office has engaged in a number of planning, development, analytical, fact-finding, and research initiatives to prepare a plan for the next 5 years. The process also includes significant community engagement and citizen participation, including surveys, meetings, mailings, phone calls, et cetera. I'm going through this because it's a mandatory component of the process, and the HUD representative is sitting in the audience. I want that person to hear me say succinctly that we did everything we're supposed to do. We have presented to you, the council, 2 major components of the process over the past 3 months. First, we developed the citizen participation plan, and that is what HUD uses to determine if, in fact, we had an idea about how we wanted to engage the public in the process. Second, we did that in January. In March, we came back to you with the results of the surveys, community outreach activities, and our consultants' housing analysis and housing market analysis as required by HUD. The presentation also included our recommendations on projects to be funded by the CDBG program over the next 3 to 5 years, which you approved. In April, 30 days ago, we placed a draft of the document, about 250 pages, on the website that we also provided to you. And several other places around the city is also required. So we distributed the document to all of the public community recreation centers and other places, the libraries, for people to read. Tonight, we fulfill another major component of HUD's regulatory requirements by presenting the draft consolidated plan for the next 5 years and the annual action plan for next year for your approval. Last week, HUD's allocation for us for FY19 is about $190,000 for this program, which represents at that level a little over $1 million for the next 5 years for this program alone. Generally, we use that money as leverage to go after additional funds, and over the 5 years, we generally bring in another $200,000 to $300,000 a year to supplement the $1 million that HUD provides. The plans that we presented to you and that we've developed over the past 9 months satisfy all of HUD's requirements. It includes a strategy to conduct 2 programs that you asked us to design as a result of our last meeting. One is a single-family owner-occupied housing rehab services program services for all income-eligible residents within the city. Second is a workforce and employment and life skills training programs for persons 18 and 35, consistent with the program that we created a couple of years ago that was so successful. This has been an all-hands-on, exhausting and intensive set of tasks and demands with a number of challenges involved. So first, I'd like to thank my staff for their work in getting this done, and the city's departments, and thank council for their improvement of all the processes along the way. Thank you for your indulgence and cooperation. With that, I ask your approval of the draft consolidated plan and annual action plan so that we can send it to HUD for their review and approval. Again, this represents approximately $1 million that we use as leverage to go after additional funds to do other things within the city. So thank you for your attention and cooperation in getting us to this point.
No, sir.
All right, questions of staff? Question? All right, someone want to make a motion? Move down.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve Resolution R-26-18.
Moved and seconded. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. All right, before we go, Counselor, I just want to make sure we're okay here. What council has agreed to do is we voted on the constant yield tax, keep that the same. You know,
Let
every
me
year that
just
I've been here-
clarify that you voted to keep the tax rate the same, but the tax yield, which is the amount you will accrue from the application of that tax rate, will increase. Okay, so the tax rate will stay the same. People's tax rates will, you currently have a 40-cent, a 0.04 cent rate, and you will continue to have that. It does exceed the constant yield. You will see an increase in revenue as a consequence of that application. You have not voted to exceed the constant yield tax rate to 43%. Your motion was, as I understand it, to increase the tax rate to 40 cents. I'm sorry, to hold the rate constant, increase the yield by setting it at the 40 cents. So the 43 cents, if you don't address it tonight, you cannot address next week or the week after.
That's completely different than the way we've done it every year before. Because every year we've done this, we've done the constant yield separately.
You can do it separately.
And then we've had a debate on whether or not, what the tax rate should stay after we did all the wrap-up and before we closed the budget. And you're suggesting to me now that by agreeing to keep the rate at 40 instead of the 38.1, that prohibits us from considering any other tax adjustment?
You set the tax rate once, so you could do that at your budget adoption, but your motion tonight was to set the tax rate.
No, I don't think that was our intent.
That was not the intent.
Okay.
That was not the intent. I'm perplexed.
All right.
Okay.
As I understand, like I say, every year we've done this, like I said, we've separated these two items. And it's I think it was our intent tonight to respond to the question about the constant yield, to either reduce the tax to 33 or 38.1 or leave it as it is. And then a separate vote following the completion of the debate on the budget, who would vote on whether or not to change it one way or the other after that. So that's why we've done it every year since I've been here.
Yes, I remember it being that.
Wait a minute.
Can I ask the city clerk for her input on that question? But my recollection is that you did not set the tax rate at a higher rate in previous years than you addressed at the constant yield hearing. I don't know what the content of the advertisement was, so
Well,
I'm
do you
going to
have a
ask the city
recommendation
clerk
for
to
us,
address
yeah?
that. So your advertisement was to increase the tax rate to 43 cents? Oh, right.
No.
Yeah, so, but your vote tonight was not to do that.
Our intention tonight was not to raise the tax rate from 40 cents to 43
No, they
cents.
can do it separately.
Our intention tonight was just to deal directly and exclusively with the tax.
I think what she's trying to explain is the previous 8 years, we didn't have a staff recommendation to increase taxes. So we only got one vote when we met the constant yield, and that was the only vote.
Right.
So if we do that tonight, we do not have an option to look next week at additional
If you,
tax
if you vote, if your vote was to exceed the constant yield tax rate by 43 cents, you could set a lower tax rate at your budget hearing. My concern is you're setting a higher tax rate at the budget hearing.
You're recommending that we do the vote at 43 tonight and then adjust it next week?
When you adopt the
When we review
budget,
everything?
right,
That would
yes.
be the correct way
You
to
would
move
set the
forward?
tax rate.
So I made the motion, and I don't plan on calling the question on that motion. So if someone wants to call the question, they can, but I don't plan on changing my motion.
And that's been, it's voted and set at 40 cents. Thank you.
Well, then
Could I make a motion?
Wait a minute. So from what you're telling me then, we've got two options, to leave the tax rate as it is and do nothing after that, or to take another vote, what, to rescind what we just did?
A motion to reconsider.
But somebody voting on the
prevailing side?
And reconsider, and then how would we deal with the same, I don't want to go back to the same question.
These two things are in joint. You can't separate them. That's her opinion, I believe.
Oh, okay.
All right? So what we need to do is reconsider the vote you took, postpone it till the 21st, and we'll do it then. We'll consider both the ish questions on the 21st, the night we approved the budget, since they are enjoined and we can't separate them.
Wait a minute, but if we do that, can, at the, when we adopt the budget, we can change it again, or not?
Well, what I'm saying is this, listen to me now, reverse the vote you took, so that you will have taken no action, okay, on this proposal. And then consider the proposal on the 21st at that time, after we've done all our work, because they are enjoined issues.
So your suggestion is to revisit what we just did, and then reschedule it?
And reschedule it for the 21st when we adopt the budget. And then whenever
That
all the
gets
work's
me-
done and we know
that gets me
exactly
out
what
of
we
the
have to
question
spend money on, and we don't.
All right, you have a motion to reconsider?
I'll make a motion to, Councilman Wolfley.
So, just for clarification for everyone, if we leave it the way it is, taxes stay flat, and that's signed, sealed, and delivered, and we're set for the new year, correct?
Correct.
And any change here would open up the opportunity to increase taxes or potentially reduce them, the tax rate, if we were so inclined.
Correct.
Okay. Okay.
All right, so you have a motion to reconsider?
I'd like to make a motion to reconsider the vote.
Nobody wants to,
All right.
I'll second the motion. No,
okay.
I'll second
This
the
is to reconsider it so that we can roll it over until, to the next meeting, to the adoption meeting.
okay.
You will set the rate at one time, you'll set the rate for both of them at one time. All right, let's see what we can do with this. You got a motion?
Okay. What I'm hearing, no, I don't want to raise taxes. That's my thing. I don't want to raise taxes. So, no. No. I don't want to raise, I'm going to go with a no, Mr. Mayor.
So you know this is gonna eliminate your project. Never mind.
Hold on a second.
All right,
Hold on a second.
all right. All right, wait a minute, let's, he's got a motion on the table to reconsider, let's see where that goes. There's a motion and second. All in favor, we have a motion to reconsider.
Where's the second?
You second, Dr. Trout. You're not gonna second? Okay, there's no second, motion dies. All right, so where we are at now is, we voted to, keep the constant rate, keep the tax rate at 40 cents. Period.
Question.
Yeah.
Hold on.
Constant rate, 40 cents. The yield, what's the yield? 38 point something? Is that what it is? 38.6, 38.7, something
The
like that?
constant yield rate is 38.4.
38.4? And the tax rate?
44.
And the tax rate is 40 cents? Yes. Okay.
Same.
This is what it is right now?
So it stays the same.
So we're done.
So,
Well-
hold on a second. So it's done, but
Well,
Mr. City Manager.
I'd like to say this. That certainly wasn't the intent, and this is an unfortunate turn of events. However, I have to tell you that that's going to reduce the budget significantly. So at the next budget session, be prepared to deal with the cuts associated with what has been done and the impact on services. Thank you.
That's all right.
Question.
Yes?
Would it be fruitful, advisable to put a hold on future spending for CIP projects?
Well, at this rate, you're not only going to not fund CIP, you might not fund some other things.
Yeah, at this rate, we may not.
Capital improvement.
Yeah, but he's.
No, if you don't change this, your tax rate for this year will be 0.40, period.
Yeah, but if you don't change your tax rate this year, I don't see how you can do any building on any of your facilities. That's what I'm getting at.
Well,
So you need to make sure that you address that issue, the fact that you are aware of the fact that you're not going to be doing any building.
well, there'll be other issues too. For example, this may impact our ability to maintain our equipment, facilities maintenance, and other significant CIP projects. If this stays the way it is, between now and next week, we'll come back with what's going to be cut.
Okay, great.
We have no choice. And which indicates services. I mean, that's
Okay.
no way around that one.
Hold on one second. Mr. Marcos, can you reintroduce your
No.
motion earlier? Because I don't want to raise taxes, but I do want to take some time to look at something a little closer.
You got over $10 million sitting in the general fund, unspent, unaccounted for, over our 25% reserves. We don't need to raise
So
taxes.
you want to spend it, out the reserve? I certainly don't want to
Yes.
spend that reserve.
The reserves in excess of 25% funds is over $10 million. There is not a one-for-one necessary reduction. I do suggest that we need to revisit what we're spending our money on, but that's not to suggest that in Soto voice that somebody's project is going to die because we've killed a tax increase. So you should not be concerned about that. We should be concerned about the overall spending for the city, just to manage it in an appropriate, judicious manner. And that's what needs to be done. And that's what should be, and that's what should be done as part of the overall budget process and the work sessions that we've been engaged in.
Mr. Mayor, if we don't increase the taxes, the fund balance that Councilman Wolfley mentioned will be diminished if we don't cut anything by $10 million this year.
By 10 million?
By nearly $10 million, 9.8 million this year, $9.5 million this year. So what we were doing, we were expeditiously spending our fund balance and paying for all the police department that we set up over the last 10 years by using increases in the fund and the tax rate, considering we haven't had a tax increase in 8 years. That was the point. But my point is, if we take no action, if it remains at 40 per 100, there'll be almost a $10 million loss in the fund balance this year, next year, which is going to be an election year. So there'll be another 10 million, if not, if we continue with the services. One of the things that in my neighborhood and in the Q section, we like our services, just the way they are. And so no, most likely there'll be another $10 million in FY20. So that $30+ million fund balance will be depleted and significantly in 2 years. And I'm just making that clear so everybody understands what the ramifications are here.
Quick question.
Mr. Sidney.
The additional revenue anticipated from 40 to 43 cents is how many $1 million?
$3.2 million.
So at present rate, according to this schedule here on page 13, for FY19, the general fund balance, assuming a 43-cent tax rate, would be at 30 million.
That's correct.
The expected 25% of expenditures level required by our stated policy for maintaining our fund balance would be at $15 million. So that is a delta of $15 million in excess of our 25% required reserves. Take off $3 million, that leaves me $22 million in reserves above my minimum required 25% of expenditures.
That's simple math. That's correct. My
That is
point
correct.
is that between now, next year, and the following year, that reserve will be down to $18 million
Understood.
without some streamlining. that's required.
Without some changes in the budget?
Which most likely will affect services.
So
we
I
can do
just-
that.
And I think what he's trying to state also is if we can't come to a consensus this year, in an election year, you are not going to get anyone to vote for a tax increase. So it's a guaranteed 2 years of loss.
So you can write off $20 million.
And then,
Yes.
I mean, you're just going to, we can do it, but you're going to end up cutting services.
Well, understand too that the reserve is not only a cushion, it is the basis for your AAA bond ratings.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, if I could jump in. Sorry. So, at the beginning of this budget process, I'd said that I wouldn't even support eating into reserves to fund next year's budget without looking at some cuts. I mean, obviously, given the $9 million projected shortfall, we're going to have to eat into reserves, so I'm happy to reverse myself on that. But, I mean, our projections have, in every year, in the last 2 years that I've been on the council, been very conservative. We've always, ultimately have seen more money in the bank than we anticipated, once expenses were dealt and revenue came in, so we have a, pretty significant projection, no doubt there, of expenses outpacing revenues. But, I feel pretty confident that, we'll probably come in lower than that as we have in previous years. And I have no problem, eating into our reserves some. What I do want is a long-term conversation, that council needs to have about, in the future, bringing our budget in line with resident priorities in such a way that we don't have to raise taxes down the road. And that's a significant conversation, and one that we've had in bits and pieces over the course of this budget session. I know council is going to be doing a conversation amongst ourselves about looking at development, in our policies and our views and kind of, talking through those. I think it would be extremely helpful, if we kept our tax rate, at 40 cents this coming year. I think it'd be really helpful for us to similarly have a conversation about, in the long term, how we want to look at our services to see, what changes we're willing to make in order to be able to keep our tax rate flat at 40% moving forward. So that's just where I am on this. I don't think the projections will be as bad as they ultimately look. They haven't in previous years. I think we can eat into our reserves and delay some other capital improvements potentially for next year's budget. But I think in the long term, I'm pretty confident that as a group, we can find ways to bring our budget in line and avoid future increases in the tax rate. That's just my 2 cents.
The obvious concern I have is that if you're looking long-term, I think your choices are going to be to put a small tax increase now, because like I say, excuse me, you know, we've covered the growth of police department stuff for 8 consecutive years by using reserve money, and covering the loss in highway user funds and whatever. My sense is that I've always thought it'd be better to slowly incrementally increase the revenue coming into the city rather than waiting, you know, a couple of years down the road and have a significant one-time shot. So those are your choices. I mean, if you're confident that, you know, leaving the tax rate at 40 cents is going to give you all the options and alternatives that you think you have. I don't know, I'm just not a fan of dealing so loosely with our reserve fund.
I agree.
Yeah. Dr. Trell.
I have a question of City Manager. Mr. City Manager, with regard to the taxes and what we tried to do tonight or what we didn't get accomplished tonight, however you want to look at it. But one thing that has been gnawing at me for the last several weeks is the fact that, and this is just me speaking, this is not gospel, it's not the truth, but this is just my impression. My impression is that the vote that we took on the 2 ice rink is creating the problem of the taxes. That's my impression. That's the reason why I voted no on that, because I saw us having problems going downstream. I have been bombarded with a lot of residents talking about, we don't want to increase taxes, you know, we on fixed income. Welcome to the club, that's me too. I want a fixed income as well. And I don't want to see my taxes increases. And I don't think anybody on the council wants to see their taxes increase. So I'm just saying, you know, this is just my perception. Doesn't mean that it's correct. My perception is when we voted for a 2-sheet ice rink, we voted for a tax increase, and I'm done.
I would like to, Mr. Mayor, if I could. Sorry, I just want to point out, one quick comment, and then I'd like to make a, for the ice rink, I do think it needs to be said, you know, the alternative to the ice rink was either the combination rink and courts, which was $38 million, with a projected $750,000 in operating losses annually. The courts were a little bit less expensive at $20 million to build, but they had a much higher anticipated annual operating expenses. The ice rink will cost $24 million to build, but its anticipated operating losses we think can get down to zero, which is $200,000 to $300,000 less than what we have now. So I mean, it is, I totally agree, it is an upfront cost, one that I think we can swallow, but it will bring our total operating losses down over what they are now. That being said, I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
I'm sorry, what was wrong?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
I'm not ready to adjourn. I've got one more question I got to get resolved. So if the motion, there's a motion and a second to adjourn, I'm going to vote no because I've got at least one more question for the. All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. All right. One last effort to save some common sense and give us a little bit of time before we make an unchangeable decision.
It's already been made.
Let me ask you, I asked you this before, and I'm still not sure I got the right answer. Or I'm not sure I understand your right answer. If we reconsider our vote on this, and then take no further action tonight, and roll it over to either the next meeting or the budget adoption meeting, what does that do for us?
Raise taxes.
Can we do that? That would give us at least a week to discuss the potential ramifications for this. I mean, if at the end of the day, council wants to, vote to leave it like this, I will disagree, but I'll accept your decision.
Because there is talking in the audience.
She can't hear you. She said she can't hear you, Mr. Mayor, because there's talking in the audience.
I'm sorry?
She couldn't hear you. She said she can't hear you because there's
Oh, I'm
talking
sorry.
in the audience.
I'm sorry. All right, here's my question. Is it possible to, have a motion to reconsider what we did tonight and then go back to where we were, and and then roll over, not make a decision on the constant yield, and roll everything over and have one final meeting, and where we look at constant yield and the city's tax rate.
Okay, so the constant yield tax rate procedure, can you hear me? So
No.
I'm addressing the council. The statute for the constant yield that sets forth the procedure that you need to use to increase taxes is 6-308 of the tax property article. And it's the section that says that if you are going to set a tax rate that exceeds the constant yield rate, and it defines what the constant yield rate is in the section previously, that you have to have a hearing and you have to advertise it, and it sets forth what exactly the advertisement has to say and even the font that you have to use. And then in subsection G of that section, it says, after the meeting, the taxing authority may adopt by law an increase in the county or municipal corporation real property tax rate that exceeds the constant yield tax rate on the day of the meeting or on a later day if the day, time, and location to consider the increase are announced at that meeting. So if you don't set the tax rate this evening, but you set the date, time, and location on which you are going to consider the increase, you can do that.
But
I'm missing.
just for clarification, though, we've already decided to leave it voted in favor of leaving it at 40 cents, and there was a motion to reconsider, and that failed for want of a second.
Yes, sir, that is my understanding.
Okay, thank you. So I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Can you make your motion again?
Wait a minute, I'm sorry.
They made a motion to adjourn.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, motion to adjourn, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion done.
Okay.
4.
I hear what you're saying before. I'm not supportive of a tax increase either. But what I want to do is to make certain that we are completely on the same, aware of what we're going to do. So I want to buy a little bit more time, and I want Mr. Marcos to reintroduce his motion. And so we can, oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Glass?
And just very quickly, before we go with Councilman Marcos, I would just ask my two council colleagues, stop trying to adjourn the meeting before we have come to a consensus, please, and had all of our questions answered. It's becoming counterproductive because it feels like it doesn't feel transparent. It feels like something's being slipped. So let us all get all of our questions answered and make sure we are all on the same page, us as council colleagues, as a respect, and with our staff. And then we can adjourn after we all are on the same page. Isn't that what we should do for our constituency? Period.
One more question, Counselor. Am I allowed to bring the motion again, since I already did it once and it failed?
And it is my view, and I have consistently taken the view that as a legislative body, you can do that. You have the ability to introduce whatever legislative actions you feel as a council are appropriate.
Okay, thank
You
you.
have to do it separately?
So I'd like to make a motion that we reverse the original vote.
I second it.
Okay. And consequence of that is we go back to where we started.
I think that's going to have to be another motion.
And there would have to be
after this.
another follow-up
Right.
motion. Okay, so the motion to reconsider is to,
Now, Mr. Marcos,
basically to repeal what we just did.
we just had that vote. We're now moving on to the second. Mr. Marcos, if you.
No.
You haven't had
He
the
just
vote.
made,
Oh, well, I
We haven't had a
second
vote
it.
yet.
I second
I
it.
second.
okay, so you have a motion and a second to reconsider, or what do
Reverse
we
the
call
original
that?
vote.
Reconsider, or, and then have another vote?
Yes, a motion to reconsider.
All right, so you have a
But-
motion to reconsider and a second.
Second.
Any question on the motion? Ms. Clapp?
Can you state exactly what we are reconsidering?
You're just having a motion now to reconsider.
But what are we,
The original vote that,
We're reconsidering his
we
motion
set it
that
at
adopted.
4%.
that's all I
adopted
want to
the
say. I
cost.
just want it to be clear to everyone what we are actually reconsidering.
That's it.
What we're
Okay.
voting to reconsider.
All right. Any other question on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 5-2. All right, now you know the motion.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I put a motion on the table to say that we are going to,
Set the date, time, and
Postpone this.
location. Yes.
is it 1 week?
To
We
a date
have
certain.
Which meeting?
to May 21st, to then set the constant yield in the current tax rate.
Moved in second. So, any questions on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Ms. Glass? Aye. All right. All opposed? 5-2. All right. So when we're going to set we'll hear both of those on which date? 21st. Okay, so then you can do the public announcement on that. All right, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're sure.
Yep.
All right. I like the motion to adjourn.
Moved in second. Any question on the motion? All in favor? Opposed? Good night.